Justin Smith, your county sheriff, and I brought an investigator with me this evening, Josh Sheldon. Josh has some relevant experience in this field. He's been assigned to our crime impact unit since its beginning, and they handle any number of events we have, and certainly the street drug crime, the gang problems we have, he's been thoroughly involved in. What I wanted to do was share some experiences we've had countywide with you. One of the first things that I learned is don't be stupid and make your own mistakes. Learn from others. We've had the opportunities to learn from the town of Windsor, City of Loveland, City of Fort Collins, Estes Park, and the experiences in Larimer County, as well as other law enforcement agencies that have wrestled with the issue of commercial marijuana operations really since 2008. We were really all caught off guard from that Amendment 20 in 2000 as it was originally passed, and in law enforcement we obviously followed those issues very carefully. When we did, Amendment 20 passed in 2000, it was really on the idea of the caregiver model, that you had the patients that there was brought forward could use marijuana with that limited exception in the law from prosecution and affirmative defense. Gave them that exception, and if they were so ill that they couldn't cultivate it, grow it, care for it themselves, because we talked about cancer patients, glaucoma patients, others with MS who just couldn't physically get around it, you could have someone grow it for them. I can tell you I was skeptical when that first came through. I was afraid we were going to see a significant increase in illegal marijuana use. And I'll be the first to admit I was wrong for the first 8 years, and that comes from the investigators, the deputies in the field, the police officers. We didn't see a significant change in our community. We saw it really stick to that original intent of those limited patients. However, in 2008, there was a memo came out from the Department of Justice, basically said, look, we're kind of looking the other way. It left the door open that they weren't going to enforce. What we saw when those businesses came in was a significant change countywide, and I think as most people know, it was in some form the Wild West. Nobody knew what to expect. Those that wanted to go into commercial operations didn't know what the laws were, what the rules were. Those things went through, and it brings you to my personal experiences. 2011, after I took office, a group out of Fort Collins called Team Fort Collins that deals with substance abuse across the board called a symposium together. They asked members from around the community, let's talk about the impacts of what we're seeing with marijuana specifically on campus at CSU. We got into a discussion, and it broadened very quickly when we heard the experiences that original intent of Amendment 20 really went out the window when the commercial dispensary showed up. After that, a citizens group came together. They didn't like the fact that the Fort Collins City Council had chosen not to run it past them, whether to allow commercial marijuana operations, grows, and retail businesses in the community. That group came forward. They asked that it be put on the ballot. They went through the process to petition on. It went on. At that point, the commercial marijuana industry brought in unions from out of state, from the East Coast, from Washington. They hired folks in. They outspent the local citizens 5-1 in a university community to keep shops open. They really put the full court press on it, and if you follow the news on it, it was a pretty massive fight. They put all their game into it. As we went through and looked at what we saw happen, we asked the questions: what are the real results? What are the numbers showing? I knew we had more crime. I could say anecdotally, we were seeing more marijuana-related incidents showing up day to day in our deputies' calls. We looked at the numbers, and for the county from 2009 through 2010, so it was a 2-year window, while most crime went down, the incidents involving marijuana went up by 20%. That was shocking to me. Everything else was on a downward trend. We queried the information from the city of Fort Collins where those operations, where 20 of them were centered. They went up 40% in 2 years, 40% increase, and that was in the kids that were getting access. That was in the police being called because there were marijuana-related incidents of crimes and other problems that they were being called to. During that time, the school board and the school district, I can't remember what Pooter School District's numbers are, but they saw basically the suspensions go through the roof. The kids were getting a hold of it. When we opened the commercial shops, it was no longer just the patients that you and I read about in Amendment 20. it became all kinds of folks, and it became the kids. The kids were showing up at school saying, it's just medicine. I got it from a friend. We were finding kids with it. We saw robberies, what we call home invasion robberies. We'd been lucky enough in Larimer County to almost never see. I was here 20 years. I could count on one hand the number of home invasion robberies. We saw them really start up, and they were going after places where it was being grown and sold legally or illegally. We saw that expand greatly. We saw people come in from out of state who said, we just heard that Larimer County is a great place to grow pot and sell it. Not under the legal part, but they followed right behind it. They went into residential and commercial properties under the guise of simply renting it for business or personal use and set up massive grow operations. When my deputies go in to take those down, based on standards, and there's research being done by National Jewish in Denver, by the doctors down there, they're saying when we go into those operations with the chemicals that are used, those are fertilizers, pesticides, molds that also come off of the humidity, that they're wearing the same kind of stuff they do in a meth house. So understand when we sanction these large grows, not the small caregiver 6 plants, these large grows, we're seeing houses and properties of landowners destroyed. We're seeing people put in dangerous situations. One of the things that I was told when we got into this discussion, I was assured, don't worry, the state's here, they're going to take care of it all. The government's here, we've got it all under control, and I know there's some smiles anytime you say that. The Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division was put together, and we were told from seed to sale, our legislators assured us, seed to sale, we track every bit. I grew up on the farms in Kansas. There's no such thing as seed to sale tracking of anything that's grown, so I was leery and suspicious to start with. We were also told that there's video surveillance beginning to end. We see everything that happens. So I went and sat down. I challenged David Miller, the lead enforcement supervisor in the Fort Collins office, to tell me how things worked. He admitted when I asked him that actually, no, they've never had one frame of video come into their office, because while the state said, yeah, we need you to put this in, the state, not surprisingly, had nothing set up behind the scenes, and as of mid-year last year, they still hadn't even got the RFP out for the equipment to attach into if they had video at the shops. So seed to sale, they didn't really know what was going on. It was self-reported. Here's what we're telling you we grew. Here's what we're telling you we sold. And as far as video surveillance, they didn't have it. But he assured me that medical marijuana enforcement under the Department of Revenue wasn't revenue agents, they were enforcement officers. They had criminal jurisdiction. I asked him to tell me about some of the criminal cases they had filed over that year. Region-wide, statewide, zero. They haven't filed any. What we found, what the investigators and the deputies tell me the truth has been, is that they go into the shops and they're advocates for the shop owners. They're not looking out for the criminal part. We had a case where I had deputies in the last 2 months, I believe it was, and correct me, Josh, if I missed this, out at a hotel, they ran across somebody with a bag full of marijuana. And obviously, we do what cops do. You start asking questions, and they said, oh, we actually did some dumpster diving down at one of those marijuana dispensaries. They were throwing this bud in the trash. Unfortunately, the way the state sanctioned it, that wasn't distribution because they could legally have it there. It was violating those rules of how they disposed of it. And so we talked to medical marijuana enforcement. What they told me was, you don't understand, this it's not good weed. It's not of value. It's not a problem. I said it is when it shows up because they're dumpster diving and selling this stuff. I've talked to them since. There's been no criminal sanctions. I think they've got their hand slapped a couple of times for it. So when you're told that Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division is on top of these, understand we haven't seen it happen countywide so far. The last thing I'll throw out in addition to those problems we saw was we talked at the federal level. And you saw it go from, and you're certainly aware here, well, we're not really going to touch this, up to, well, the feds are actually coming in, they're looking at that 1,000 foot, and they're sending letters out. I have it on pretty good word that that's probably the beginning of the enforcement. I think it's going to step up. And this only goes through a point that we have the United States Attorney General who says he's not going to enforce the laws that were passed by the legislature, because the growing of marijuana, certainly for commercial purposes, continues to be against the law. And if anybody tells you this isn't going out of state, I sent my guys out to do a little surveillance on a couple of shops in Fort Collins for 4 hours. The people that are supposed to have licenses and cards didn't all have cards. They came from out of state. They would buy 2 ounces, leave, come back, buy 2 more ounces. the stores, when we debated this in Fort Collins, said, yeah, we acknowledge that a person could come in all day long and keep buying 2 ounces. An ounce is basically a quart bag. We saw them, so you're looking at 2 quart-sized bags, and they could come back again and again, and they're going shop to shop with their card. That's the reality of what we saw there. And I warn you, the industry is not regulated as it was portrayed to us. The people who came in to talk about the relief, and we understand no objection to what's in Amendment 20. We recognize the law. We follow the law. We had people come in that fit the Amendment 20 definition when it came to City Council in Fort Collins or the county commissioners, but when we sat outside the shop, that's not who we saw. That's not who we saw coming in. We saw young kids. We saw them on bicycles and motorcycles and running in, and a carload of kids pull up. One of them get out, and this is in a 2-hour period, go in, get it, run back out, jump in the car, high fives, it was a score. That's the reality of what we saw. I have not been down here to see what goes on at your shop. I've seen different things, and I warn you of those things that do go on and the potential with it. And we've been told, don't worry, the state regulates, the doctors are good. You saw in the paper the other day, we hit 2 doctors that we told were probably up to no good, and they absolutely said, you don't need anything, just here, give me the $100. It's follow the money. I warn you, when you make it commercial, it's getting out there. When you stick with the caregiver model, it worked for 8 years. The commercial model, follow the money. These doctors typically make $100 a prescription or a letter. It takes them 5 minutes. They can make between $300,000 and $400,000 a year cash money because they're going broke trying to deal with insurance and Medicare and Medicaid, and they're going backdoor. And these are 2 doctors that I hope that wasn't the way they practiced over their lifetime, but they turned up that way. So with that, Josh,